Hey guys, my name is Jada. Welcome back to another video created to help guide your faith group discussion or personal Bible study. Today we're exploring how Christ shows up in our lives. In this video, you'll watch clips from a message delivered by our lead pastor, Pastor Mike, about truly getting to know Jesus and reflecting on ways he shows up in our lives. Getting to know Jesus and growing closer to him is to intentionally invest in our faith. This topic is an important one, especially if you're going through a season of grief or confusion. We'll dive into the reality of our own spiritual maturity and how that affects what we know and assume about Jesus. As Pastor Mike says, we're only as spiritually mature as we choose to be. To help you reflect further, we've created a PDF with discussion and reflection questions. You can find the link to them in the description and comments below. But don't feel pressure to get through all of the questions. Just use them as a guide and focus on what resonates with you or your group. And if you're not already part of a faith group, we encourage you to consider joining one. They're an amazing way to build your community, grow your faith, and have conversations that matter. To learn more, visit our website at faithma.org and find the group that's the right fit for you. We are so glad you're here, and we hope this video blesses and inspires you. So let's get started.
It's not the story you'd expect. None of the people look good. They're all lost, confused, terrified. They don't get what's going on. They don't remember the teachings of Jesus. They're walking around, and the big question on everybody's mind is, where's Jesus? Luke tells you, and it's not what you would expect. It's not like Jesus shows up with Pontius Pilate and goes, hey, dude, we need to talk. Not like he shows up with the religious leaders who put him on the cross and like, right? None of this is going to happen. I think what Jesus does and what Luke records for us is for everyone who wasn't there, for everyone who couldn't be there, for everyone who heard the story later, how can Jesus show up for me is what Luke is going to talk about. And so let's go right into it, because this is the next thing that he says. So the same day, two of Jesus' followers are walking to the village of Emmaus. This is important, right? Everyone's like, where's the body? Walking to Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem. So this is a long walk. As they walked along, they were talking about everything that had happened. When I was reading this for the first time, I hit that sentence, I was like, so what, right? Where's Jesus? What's going on? And as they talked and discussed these things, Jesus shows up here. He shows up with two guys who are walking to another town. And he came and began to walk with them, but God kept them from recognizing him. This is weird. Jesus silently shows up and begins to walk along with two people then throughout life to talk about the resurrection. And here's what happens. So Jesus asks them. And this is a great portion of the story. Jesus starts and ends with a question. Because some of us think Jesus is going to intrude into our lives. It's going to be a great dramatic display. There needs to be like lights flashing and angels and all that. And if that doesn't happen to people, they're like, do I really know who Jesus is? Most of the time for people, Jesus does this. Quietly shows up in your life and begins to probe you with some questions. What are you discussing? So intently as you walk along. And they stopped short. I love it. They stopped short. You know, you read the Bible, you got to put the emotion in, and sadness is written all over their face. And one of them, Clopas, says, you got to be the only person in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about all the things that have happened here the last few days. Jesus' death rocked the city. And Jesus goes, what things? He's trying to draw the conversation out of them, to engage them in a discussion. And Jesus says to them, you foolish people. You find it so hard to believe all that the prophets wrote in the scriptures. Wasn't it clearly predicted that the Messiah would have to suffer all these things before entering into glory? And Jesus took them through the writings of Moses and the prophets, explaining all the scriptures, the things concerning himself. Jesus took his Bible, what we call our Old Testament, and he's like, let me tell you something. Let's talk for a moment. And he went back to the Bible. And he said, if you really want to understand what God was doing with Jesus, you have to go back to the Bible. Because it's right, you can't get past the third chapter in the very big first book in our Bible before you go like, oh, there's Jesus. And you start to go a little bit further and you run into Abraham. Oh, there's more about Jesus in this. And then you get a little bit farther into, you start to get to Kings and you talk about David and the stump of David and the messianic promise and all this. And like, well, there's Jesus all over the place. You get into the prophets and they're talking about someone called the suffering servant. Well, there's Jesus all over the place. Jesus took them back to the Bible because the only way to truly understand Jesus and God's plan for him is to go into the Bible. Go back to the source materials, which makes me wonder, what are people thinking? In New England, this is a stat that breaks my heart. 90% of the people who live in the 6 New England states fall into one, if not more than one of these categories. They don't have a Bible at home. And they don't remember ever there being a Bible at home, right? They have never read the Bible. And if they have a Bible, they have rarely read it. They may have tried. They got through Genesis. That was kind of cool. It was kind of like a Real Housewives of Genesis report as they're going through the whole thing. They get into Exodus. It's kind of cool. It was like a movie. And then they hit Blueprints. They get to Leviticus. And it's like Stephen King. And they say, that's enough. They give up. 90% of the people who live in New England either don't have a Bible, have never read the Bible, or have a Bible they rarely read. And it makes me wonder, then what is it that they believe about the physical resurrection of Jesus we just talked about? Now, by this time, let's go back to our story. They're nearing Emmaus at the end of their journey. And Jesus acted as they were going along. Now, key decision point. Jesus is like, hey, this has been a great conversation. Looks like it's going on. And they say, stay the night with us, since it's getting late. And so Jesus went home with them. And that is, in Jesus' culture, an invitation to a relationship. Come into my home. I want to know you better. I would love to have a relationship with you. Let's sit at the table and talk some more. And I think this is the most significant thing that happened on the road to Emmaus, is that they said, stop and come to my home. They brought their faith into their home. Maybe, I remember when I was standing out at the Grand Canyon, looking at the grandeur of the Grand Canyon. Or have you ever been camping at the foot of a mountain that seems to reach up to the heavens? Ever been in a place where there's no light pollution, and you look up and you see a galaxy, and you think, I'm so small. And in that moment, you have the feeling of a divine other. You go, wow. And then go back to the tent. You could be the person who says, I should talk to someone about God. And then you say, hey, I think there's a pastor at that church. Or when your friend talks about faith, you say, hey, can you tell me some more? Or that moment out in the wild where you felt the presence of the divine other, maybe you should go to church. Or when you're coming out of church, maybe you should follow through with what you say. We say at this church, you're as spiritually mature as you choose to be. I can't make you spiritually mature. I can make sure this church has all the resources and relationships you need to grow mature. It's not my job to make you mature. You got to make that decision for yourself. Like these two people walking along a road who stop and go, wait a minute, come into my life. Come into my home and tell me more. As they sat down to eat, he took the bread and he blessed it. And then he broke it and gave it to him. And suddenly their eyes were open and they recognized him. You know why? The first church that read this story, when they saw he sat down to eat, took bread, blessed it, and broke it, they would have gone, oh, communion. That's exactly what it's meant to tell you. Luke is trying to say to you, do you want your eyes open? Get involved in a community of worship. You want to see Jesus? Get involved in a community that believes in Christ, will teach you from the Bible, and join them in worship.